County Transit District. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. I will now ask Suhel Rodriguez our clerk of the board, to call roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair Edson.
Present.
Board Alternate Luna.
Present.
Board Member Martinez.
Present.
Board Member Hinsey. Here. Board Member Garcia. Board Member Robinson.
Here.
Board Member Desmond. Board Member Jenkins. Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Member Lee. This completes the roll.
Thank you. I understand Board Member Jenkins will be with us momentarily. Suhel, do any members of the public have comments specific to the special meeting agenda?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, registration to provide public comments will end. The sole item on today's special meeting agenda is a closed session regarding the performance evaluation of NCTD's General Counsel, Lori Winfrey. Ms. Winfrey, please take us into closed session.
Good morning. Thank you. So as the board chair noted, there's one item pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, the performance evaluation for General Counsel.
Returning now from closed session, Ms. Winfrey, are there any reportable actions from closed session?
No, Madam Chair, the board did meet in closed session to discuss the executive committee's performance evaluation for general counsel with no reportable action. However, the matter will be formally considered at the regular meeting of the board this morning as noticed as agenda item number 14.
Thank you. We will now adjourn and move to the regular board meeting, which will begin right now. Good morning, and for those of who attended the special meeting, welcome back. At this time, I would like to call to order the May 16th, 2024 regular meeting of the North County Transit District Board of Directors. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. I will now ask Suhel Rodriguez, our illustrious clerk of the board and director of administration, to call roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board Chair Edson,
Present.
Board Alternate Luna,
Present.
Member Martinez, Board Member Hensy. Here. Board Member Garcia.
Present.
Board Member Robinson,
Here.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins. Here. Board Member Contreras,
Present.
Board Member Coleman.
Here.
This completes the roll.
Thank you. Board Member Luna, or I guess that's Board Member Alternate Luna. Would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please place your right hand over your heart, ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Suhel, please provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Certainly. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on this floor in this building, and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you. Suhel, have there been any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. The board agenda document was revised due to an inadvertent misnumbering of the presentation items and minutes. This revised agenda was sent to the board. It was updated on the NCTD website, and an errata sheet has been provided to the board.
Thank you. And do we have any non-agenda public comments today?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, registration to provide general public comments will end. Before we proceed, I have a couple of quick protocol items to share. First, I ask board members to please hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. Next, when the time comes for board member questions or comments, please raise your hand or catch my eye and wait until you're called upon to speak. Finally, when it is your turn to speak, please turn on and speak into your microphone. You may do so by using the pencil provided to you and selecting mic on this cute little thing that's in front of you. Turning your mic on will ensure that your comments are heard by those listening to the meeting online. Our first item will be a presentation regarding enhancements to the Pronto Fare System. Nick Sofel, Director of Strategic Planning and Transit Systems, will be presenting this item. Nick, you have our attention. Oh, and it
You
looks
actually
like
get a
Chris
two-part.
Orlando's up here too.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to introduce the item. I am Chris Orlando, Chief Planning and Communications Officer. And as you noted, I'm here with Nick Sofel, our Director of Strategic Planning. First slide, please, Nick. We wanted to provide the board with an update on the Pronto Fare System. As the board knows, the Pronto Fare System is approaching its third birthday, upcoming in September. As you know, we work with MTS on the administration and the management of the system. MTS is the system administrator, but we partner on both the day-to-day management of the system, but also the enhancement roadmap, how we plan future enhancements and improvements to the fare system itself. And so today, Nick is going to take you through several exciting enhancements that are planned for the Pronto system. Some in the near term, which are real major improvements for the user experience. And then some in the long term, which will also bring benefits to our riders down the road. So Nick's going to take you through those enhancements, and then we're both here to answer any questions you may have. Nick.
Well, thank you, Chris. We last addressed the board on an update to Pronto back in February of last year. So key is to be able to explain some of the progress we've made since that last meeting. And if you recall, one of the major objectives that we were going to accomplish, from last year going into this year was open loop payments. And this is the ability to be able to purchase transit fare by simply using a tap of a credit card on a validator, essentially aligning transit fare system with how everyone buys things, everyday items, every single day. You just go to the validator, tap your credit card, hop on and ride, and then not have to worry about what is the underlying fare structure. Do I have to go to a TVM? It makes it a very easy transaction to be able to have folks purchase fare. So last year, we had a series of workshops with our partners at MTS. We worked with California Integrated Travel Project, CAL-ITP, our merchant services, INIT, and Jacobs Consulting to come up with the best possible way to implement open loop payments as quickly as possible. And to do so, we wanted to identify what we call the minimum viable product, or how could we implement this as quickly as possible and get this out to our customers. Some of the challenges that were identified as a part of that collaborative process was first, reduced fares on open loop had some challenges. It would require someone who is in a reduced fare category to be able to link that to an actual credit card. And so there are some challenges between that. There aren't too many systems that have yet set up to be able to do reduced fares with open loop, but it's something we want to look for in the future. The second was fare capping. Fare capping is possible with open loop. However, it does require some complex tracking of payments. It also requires certain customer diligence to make sure you're tapping the exact same credit card every single time to be able to register the fare capping. The third risk identified in those collaborations and the conversations was what's called the first tap risk. This is probably the most important one. Essentially, when you tap on a validator to ride transit, a lot of times folks don't even stop at the validator. It's more like a tap and walk, and you're still going. There is not enough time for the tap to fully register a complete payment. Think about the amount of time you might spend if you're buying something at a 7-Eleven and you put your card in, you're waiting for 5-10 seconds for that transaction to fully process. You don't have that time in transit. So the way the system works is it validates upon an initial tap very quickly in a fraction of a millisecond. And then what happens is you get on the system, it's going to give you a green light. It's going to say go. Then in the following minutes, it's going to be able to figure out whether or not that tap is actually fully registered. And at the point that, let's say it is, you're good to go. If not, it will then block your card for subsequent use at that point. But there is a risk initially when you first tap that it's possible that someone could get on the system, and then we find out that there's no fare that's being paid because the card is either not have a sufficient balance or there could be some sort of other issue. There is a system in the back end that we are creating to help recoup any losses through that process. And then the last piece that was a risk is fare inspection. The ability to inspect open loop payments on an ungated rail system is fairly new. Most systems that have implemented open loop either have bus-only systems or they have gated rail. Think about, MTS in New York, where you have fare gates. And so you tap your card, the fare gate lets you in. And that's kind of the enforcement mechanism. In our case, we don't have those gates. So having that fare inspection is really important and something that's fairly new in the industry for our type of system. So based upon those risks, we met, collaborated, came up with what we call the MVP, the minimum viable product. So we are implementing this summer, 2024. So in the coming months, this will become live system-wide. We're going to allow these taps for open loop for one-way adult fares only within a 2-hour window for eligible transfers. And we're going to have fare inspection adapters included, as a part of the implementation process. And then in future phases, we're going to look at daily and monthly capping, adding those reduced fare categories and those other enhancements to the system. Quickly, we will have those fare inspection devices. This is a new system, and this is kind of a short-term solution. This designed to work within our existing fare adapters. This is an adapter that's going to plug in with our fare system inspection. It's fully PCI compliant, and the great piece about this device is that there'll be no contact between our customers and personal credit cards. So when they go to inspect the credit card, it's more so they hold this up while the tap card pad on there. They tap the card, and then the screen will tell them whether or not their fare is valid for the open loop. So That was a really key importance to try to make sure that our employees weren't directly responsible or holding on to individual persons' credit cards. Those devices will be deployed by September 2024. Once this rolls out, you will see it everywhere. How do you know if it's active? You will see these decals and stickers on every single Pronto reader across the entire system in both our system and MTS. So you'll see the credit card logos that are going to show up on the top. Another key point to put out here is we have enabled the ability to use mobile wallets of all kinds. So you can use your Apple wallet, your Apple or Google enabled smartwatch, any kind of mobile wallet tap. You can also do that with the validators. You just tap the watch right up to the validator and it will apply to fare. I'm going to discuss 4 enhancements or projects we've completed in this year. The first is in-app info messages. This was really important last year, and it was how can we provide additional messaging to our customers when they're using the Pronto app? And so we completed that last year. On the screen is an example of now when you go into the app, every so often, we remind folks to tap or scan before boarding, and they receive those in-app messages. We also added branded passes. So for when we do promotions, like for instance, last year we did the Pony Express Pass, and we're about to do the Fair Tripper coming up over the summer. Those passes are actually branded now within the Pronto app. So you'll see that branding on the left-hand side that makes it stand out. And we're trying to make the branding very consistent with the branding of the event. So it's an exciting opportunity there. We implemented a new ticket vending machine at Escondido Transit Center right next to the customer service window. So we're very excited to have completed that project last year. And then the last really exciting enhancement was the online reduced fare application. So previously, if you needed to apply for senior, disabled, Medicare, or youth discounted fares, you had to go in person to the center to be able to be verified and to be deemed eligible for those programs. We have worked with MTS diligently, and we now have an online reduced fare application that went live in the beginning of this year. So folks can now do that completely virtually online without having to come personally into the customer center. And we're currently working on joint efforts with MTS to register and verify as many youth opportunity participants as possible. We're doing in-person registration events at schools, pushing the online application, which has had a really high success rate. 90% of the folks who do the automatic conversion through the online process are processed. And for the 10% that aren't, they get processed in less than 3 days manually. And we're still, of course, open at our customer service centers to accept anyone who has walk-in appointments or want to come in to do those reduced fare portal conversion. Our future roadmap for this coming up fiscal year 25, we are looking to add additional Pronto ticket vending machines. This was a capital improvement item that was approved last year, still working on it. But we believe those will get up and running. Those include additional ticket vending machines at locations where we received ample public feedback of the need to be able to include those. So for instance, at Old Town Station, there's a need for additional TVMs closer to our platform. At Sorrento Valley, there's a need additional at Escondido. Platform 3 at Oceanside Transit Center for Coaster. It's a couple of really high priority locations that we're looking to get those new TVMs installed. Additional validators as well. And then we're going to be making enhancements to the online reduced fare portal. We're already receiving some feedback, and we're working diligently with MTS to make that even easier. And then enhancements, of course, to the mobile app. Looking further out, we want to look to do a Pronto rewards program, essentially finding a way to be able to reward people for riding public transit. We're going to look at replacing the QR codes that are within the app right now you would scan them. And there's been some issues with the light and daylight of scanning those QR codes. Looking to move that all to tap cards in that time period, as well as integrating Pronto with NCTD microtransit, and then continuing the next phase of open loop. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Chris. Before we move to board questions or comments, Suhel, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, registration to speak on this item will end. Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Board Member Hensy.
Yeah, this is so exciting. Thank you for your hard work to bring it to fruition. I just had a quick question about the first tap risk and the blocking of the card.
Yeah.
How long does it block the card till the customer is able to try again?
It blocks the card until the customer has paid. So it will continue to try to ping the card in the background to recoup that payment. And at the point that the payment is settled, it unblocks the card automatically.
Got it. Okay. Seems complicated, but I'm glad there's a system in place.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Board Member Contreras?
I just really want to thank you both and the whole team for working on this. This is something that I definitely wanted to see come online faster. Throughout the system, it can be difficult to just access it, right? And be able to recuperate that fare. I do want to say that I think it's incredible that we're also going to have the mobile wallets included. When it comes to, I want to call out Platform 3 here at Oceanside Transit Center. Someone who uses the coaster every once in a while, having a validator over there is going to be critical. Being able to have better accessibility. It's something that I've talked to our CEO, Sean, about. It takes such a long time to get to Platform 3. And sometimes I see the Sprinter and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to make it to the Sprinter. I don't do it, but I have like the thought, like, can I just jump over? So I know that we're going to look at enhancements there. And the last thing I want to say is that, I have issues with the QR code with Pronto because I have like 7 cases on my phone to make sure it doesn't break. And so what I've noticed is that it does make it very difficult to read. So I love that we're going to move to tap instead. I think that will facilitate the onboarding. I've seen a lot of issues. It's not just me. Other folks are having issues, trying to get it, the QR code scan. So thank you so much. And this is really, really great news.
You.
Thank you. Board Member Robinson.
Thanks. Nice work, I think. Are there other systems that are using this, rail systems that are along the lines here, like in Orange County or wherever?
Yeah, the open loop payments.
Yeah.
I think there are other systems along the line that are using open. But each of the systems along the line are on their own unique system. So they're separate payment and fare systems, but similarly use open loop. So if you tap your credit card, you will be able to do that in those places where they accept the open loop payment.
There are 2 systems that use the exact same provider we use for fare systems. So in Portland, Oregon, they've implemented open loop payments, as well as in Pinellas County, Florida, the St. Pete area. They both have in it as the back office for their fare systems, and they've successfully implemented.
Yeah, that was going to get my next question. We've looked at other systems.
But our immediate neighbors are on a different platform.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Garcia?
Yes, thank you. This is wonderful news as someone who has been riding around town and trying to just get to know the system better. Luckily, in front of my house, I can walk out and walk a little bit and I can catch the bus and chat with the other riders. And, oh yeah, this is great. This is not so great, things like that. My experience thank you for the increasing validators. I don't know if that's what they were called, but I was in London and the train was coming and I had to go to the end of the platform with 3 cards and then run there and run back while my daughter was keeping the door open and it kept beeping, close the door. But that would have been very interesting to get lost over there. So thank you very much for doing that. That's been going to be critical. Also, I deal with people that cross the border and they come over here and then I ask them, they're seniors, how do you know? And they don't quite understand how is it that they can get to choose. So this is going to make it a lot easier for them to be able to tap and know what category they fall into. Now, regarding that, if somebody is paying cash when they get on the bus, or they're going to use a tap card on the bus itself, is there a way for them to be able to identify what category they're on when they're on the bus? Going to pay directly on the bus?
Yeah, I mean, if they get we have a process right now for doing the reduced fare. And once they have that categorization, they can pay cash on board the bus as well, in order to get that receive that reduced fare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all your hard help and I'm work, and I'm really excited to see this come more and more to fruition.
Thank Board Member Martinez.
I just want to echo what the other board members said. Congratulations. I've said this before, and so hopefully this will make it easier for present writers. But the goal is to get people to understand it's easier. So obviously, communication and public relations, again, just letting people know the ease of it, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, exactly. We'll be doing, as the launch data approaches, we'll do broad communications along with MTS around this. And this open loop enhancement is particularly important for the San Diego region because we do have many folks who visit our region from other places and may not be familiar with how our system works. And for those visitors who often arrive at Oceanside Transit Center, the ability just to tap whatever card is in their wallet makes it much easier and much more seamless for them to ride.
This is a great move forward. It obviously brings benefits to the customer experience and I think benefits to the district as well with perhaps better fare box recovery as well as more robust tracking of ridership, correct?
Correct.
Great.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I just,
Board Member Garcia.
thank you. Director Martinez mentioned something that just kind of clicked something. And I just wanted to say thank you for providing staff on special events like Padres games, things like that, because we do have a lot of people that have no idea. And the other thing is we want to get people through quickly. And there have been times where I've been standing there trying to figure out what do I push? And having staff there has been critical. So thank you very much for everything that you do to make this the experience better.
Yeah,
Just wanted to mention that.
appreciate that. And part of the open loop strategy was that not only for us on the platforms for the Padre games, but also for MTS at Snapdragon and the large events that they manage there, being able to get a lot of people through and paying their fares in a very efficient way was one of the great benefits of the system.
All right. Well, this item was informational only and does not require a vote. The next item on our agenda, and by the way, again, thank you, Nick and Chris. The next item on our agenda is approval of the April 18th, 2024 board meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 18th, 2024 regular board meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Hensy. Second by Garcia. Please vote. And we use our where do we point them? Okay.
Oh, Mr. Desmond's.
On the motion of Board Member Hensy, seconded by Board Member Garcia to approve the minutes of the NCTD's regular board meeting of April 18, 2024. Motion passes. Board Member Luna abstains.
Thank you. There are 9 items on the consent agenda for action today. So have any members of the public requested that any consent items be pulled?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Board members, do you wish to pull any items from consent? Seeing no hands raised, may I have a motion to approve consent items 3 through 11?
Contreras moves approval.
Motion by Contreras, second by Martinez. Please vote.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Martinez to approve consent items 3 to 11. Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 12 is an informational item related to development of the district's FY 2025 operating budget and the FY 2025 through 2029 capital improvement program. NCT's Chief Executive Officer, Yoon Park Lynch, is with us to present this item. Yoon, the floor is yours.
I'm actually the Chief Financial Officer. Good morning, board members. I will be presenting an overview of the proposed budget for this coming fiscal year. This is a presentation only. We'll be coming back to the board on June 20th for formal adoption of the budget. Based on any feedback from the board, we'll be presenting the final budget in June as well. This slide provides some background of some of the activities the NCTD has done in the last few months that support the development of the budget. The service implementation plan has been finalized, and those metrics have been incorporated in the operating budget that I will be presenting. The service implementation plan is a 10-year document within the annual operating budget that provides service level assumptions for the upcoming fiscal year, as well as a 10-year outlook. It is required based on the terms of the memorandum of understanding the NCTD has with SANDAG. And then any service levels within the service implementation plan are ultimately based on projected revenues for support of the operations as well as capital for the district. This graphic summarizes some of the key activities that will affect service levels in the next 10 years. As you can see, we are investing in breeze frequencies to reflect and support growing ridership. We are also going to be operating 2 new coaster stations in the next 2 years. One of them is going to be the convention center platform, as well as the special events platform in Del Mar. This also incorporates some increases in coaster service to fill in key gaps. Although funding has not really been identified for that level of service. However, they're incorporated within these ridership projections. We're also piloting new microtransit zones throughout the service area. And then if there are any funding to increase Sprinter frequencies, those will be needed through double track. This slide summarizes some of the key activities that will be affecting our operating budget in the next 5 years. We are seeing growth in our Federal Transit Administration, TD and Transnet revenues. TD and Transnet revenues, those are derived mostly from sales taxes. So even sales tax collections have been flat, even though we have seen above growth in pricing. We also have seen more and higher operating costs and capital costs associated with inflation. And then what you will see in our 5-year plan is more and more of our funding is being used primarily for operations, state of good repair, maintenance, with less and less dollars available for fulfilling our capital needs. Another key component of the next 5 years is that we are reaching the end of our COVID relief funding. So we received substantial funding back in 2020 from the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan Act. That funding is kind of coming down close to an end. And we project that we'll have about $25 million of carryover that we will spend through FY 2026. Other items within our budget is that we have increased costs for the coastal connection as well as microtransit services. On December 2022, staff made a presentation to the board that showed the fiscal impact for bus operations and maintenance. The Youth Opportunity Pass is also funded through FY 2025, and no funding so far has been programmed for future years. And then with our conservative projected historical data, service increases beyond 2025 don't have a reliable funding source at this time. Other things that are coming the horizon is that we are seeing increased costs for fueling for our breeze fleet. As you know, the Innovative Transit Clean Transit Act that was adopted in 2018 requires major transit agencies to transition to zero emission buses. So what we have seen is that the cost of hydrogen fuel is significantly higher than the cost of CNG or gasoline. Other challenges within the next 5 years are related to our railroad liability. The cap is set up by the federal government based on the CPI. That cap is currently at $323 million. And it's proving very challenging to find domestic insurers for providing the coverage. And NCD has been relying on foreign-owned insurers to get that liability insurance. And they are constantly evaluating the market on claim losses across all sectors to price those premiums, which have exceeded the CPI for the last 5-10 years. Also, another significant change is going to be the transition to zero emission for rail. So the Sprinter fleet replacement cost to replace that fleet to zero emission is projected to be between $120 and $229 million. There's also going to be needs for modifications for maintenance facilities and also for transit stations to accommodate that zero emission fleet. And currently, we don't have any funding identified for that initiative. This slide summarizes some of the significant revenues for the district. These are, for the most part, formula funding. The FTA, which is based on population, the Transnet TDA, which is based on sales taxes. NCTD receives 30% of the apportionment that's allocated to the San Diego region. Significant assumptions built within the budget are the additional staffing. NCTD is doing more and more of the work in-house and transitioning from contracted services. That's reflected this year with the additional headcounts that we have for facility custodians. Those were previously contracted and now they are going to be in-house NCTD employees. We also have the largest individual budget item is also the contract for bus operations and maintenance that's contracted to MV Transit. That contract is in our budget of $50.9 million. That's a little bit over 30% of our overall operating budget. And that includes a 3% CPI adjustment that's based on contract terms. And we have also added operators to support the Sorrento Valley Coastal Connection, as well as NCTD Plus Microtransit. There's also some assumptions built on the budget related to fuel consumption. The Serena Coaster fleet uses diesel. So we are assuming market prices of about $100 per barrel within our operating budget, which is a conservative approach. Also, as I mentioned earlier, property and liability insurance premiums have been going much higher significantly compared to CPI. So our budget includes a 15% increase over what we budget in FY 2024. We also have one-time expenses for $6.1 million. A lot of those one-time expenses are supporting our transition to zero emission for our bus fleet, both for battery electric buses as well as hydrogen buses. We also have some studies that are being funded. They have dedicated funding sources from Caltrans or from the Zero Emission Transition Capital Program from the state. So those are considered one-time expenses since they are not recurring every year. We have established a contingency of $100,000. And NCTD will continue making its payments towards its debt obligations for the Sprinter debt as well as the unfunded accrued liability, but those are not included in the operating budget since they're not considered operating expenses. This table summarizes our budget for the next coming fiscal year. As you can see, it's an increase of 1.44% compared to what we budgeted last year. With to note some of the significant changes are the less funding from the federal as COVID relief funding is being expiring. And you can also see that we have less reliance on professional services, on contracted services, and doing most of that work in-house. And our increase in purchase transportation is directly associated with the MV contract. The 5-year plan is a projection of the sources of revenues and expenditures in the next 5 years. As you can see, we are balanced from the operating standpoint, but we face a capital deficit. The budget goal for every year is to invest at least $15 million in capital projects. You can see that in FY 2029, we are not able to meet that minimum $15 million. I also want to point that in today's dollars, $50 million does not get you a lot. So we are much more reliant on getting discretionary funding to be able to meet our state of good repair capital needs. Next steps is that we will be coming back to the Passcode meeting on May 23rd. Based on feedback from the board today, we will release our documents on June 4th for public review, and we'll come back on June 20th for final approval and the adoption of the budget, as well as setting the public hearing. That concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Well, thank you, Yoon, for that very informative presentation. This item does not require a vote. This is like a early peek kind of thing. After consideration by the Performance Administration and Finance Committee on May 23rd, the final budget will move to the full board for consideration, as Yoon mentioned, on June 20th, 2024. Before we move to board questions or comments, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, registration to speak on this item will end. Board members, questions, comments? Board Member Contreras, I'm just going to start at that end and work my way around.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a question regarding, there was a slide that showed, it was early on, it showed total hours on the top. It was a gray bar. Just curious, on the total hours. Oh, yeah, there it is. Is that the total hours of operation of the different modes? Or what does that refer to?
Yes, for the all modes combined in the system.
Okay, so a follow-up question to that is if we're able to more quickly transverse our service area, either by increasing the speed of the mode with, enhancements to the actual vehicle or the infrastructure like bus-only lanes, does that total hour bar move down?
So
Or
Katie,
I'm trying to figure out the relationship.
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, it can. I think the best example to give is bus rapid transit. When you add frequency to a corridor, or you're able to speed up the average speed of the line, it can produce results. I think that's not necessarily the desired outcome from speeding up routes. I think anytime we want to make operational route efficiencies, what we're really attempting to do is add more frequency to the corridor. So it's not necessarily a desire to back the hours off. It's more about reallocation of what we're able to save into either more frequent service or enhancements along connecting lines that would exist within the cities that would connect to a high frequency corridor. Katie, you want to add to that?
That was perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I appreciate that. So, we don't have any bus rapid transit with North County Transit District, right? MTS has it out of the Escondido Transit. And so I was just curious to see when we are looking at doing some kind of faster mode via, BRT. I'm super supportive of that. I just was really curious as to how that would affect the hours. But thank you. That was great. Other question, I just had a general question about TDA. I think the state of California was putting a task force together to relook at it. Do we know what's going on with that task force? They were kind of idle.
so TDA is by legislature is a dedicated funding for derived from sales taxes. And as far, I don't know if any task force. I know that there was some discussion in SANDEC about reallocating of TDA 4.5, but those funding are dedicated for transit.
Yeah, I think it's like from the 1970s or something. But I do believe that the state of California was going to be revisiting TDA, and they had some kind of task force that they were putting together. And I think a little thing like the pandemic maybe stalled it. And I don't know. I'm just, as a general question, maybe I could get the answer later on, but I just wanted to have a pulse on that to see, because that could affect a few different things for us.
Yeah, we can
There
definitely-
was relief provided in during the pandemic related to fare box recovery ratios, but that didn't affect the amount of funding that the district receives.
Yeah, so I'll look for information, because I 100% know that the state was looking at some kind of task force. And I know that some regional leaders here have been asking about, TDA and what's going to happen with it. So I'll just connect with you, Sean, later on to see if there's more information on that. And then when it comes to the YOP, really saddened to see that we don't have any funding past 2026. But I am curious to see, because we have had YOP for a little bit of time, if there's any data showing, hey, we had these youth riders that aged out of YOP, and what is the status of them continuing to use public transit? I don't know if we have a data point on that.
Yeah, we're having conversations about that internally. In fact, Nick's group and Katie's group have done a fantastic job. I think part of what you're seeing with our Pronto plan is sort of the ability for us to data dump some of that into Power BI and sort of bifurcate youth riders and honored citizen riders and sort of figure out what the impact is system-wide in terms of are we growing future riders as an adult in a youth setting? In fact, we just had a conversation about that pretty robust at the staff meeting on Wednesday. So yes, there's a lot of energy being put into that.
Okay, awesome. And the last thing that I have is just a statement about the zero emission by 2035 as pertains to the Sprinter corridor. I'm really looking forward. I know it's a huge, huge lift, but that Sprinter corridor needs to be a lot more reliable. I've been stuck in a few places and, have to wait a significant amount of time. And I know that it's, this boutique locomotive. So when something breaks, it's really hard for us. But in addition to that, really curious to see which way NCTD goes as far as the type of locomotives and cars that are going to be on that rail line, because the platforms are so specific to the Sprinter and they're a little thin for some of the other locomotives. So I'm just curious to see in the future how that turns out and if it includes a little bit of a rehab for our transit stations, what that would look like. But thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions, Director Contreras, even if they weren't all on budget. Board Member Jenkins.
Thank you. I have a few questions here. When you talked about the service implementation plan, I understand the MOU requires a 10-year forecast, if you will. How practical is 10 years? And follow-up to that is, do we gather any data to look at what the past forecast has been versus the actual?
So we have Katie Persons, Director of Planning.
Yes, so I can answer from the ridership perspective. You see what is projected in the SIP every month in the topper. So you'll see the ridership projected or tracked against what's in the budget document there. In terms of practicality, we update the 10-year plan every time we update the annual budget, and we're much more granular in the immediate fiscal year, so fiscal year 2025, just to get us more information about the service and the anticipated ridership. We are tracking these major projects as they do impact our services and projected ridership across those 10 years, and we're adjusting those timelines based on whether funding was received, whether we need to update timelines for any other reason, and then it's a cyclical process each year.
So we do look at, we projected X number, and then we do go back and look to see, were we close to that number?
Mm-hmm.
And then if not, if we are consistently not meeting that number, then would you adjust the current forecast based on not meeting it over the past however many years? You see what I'm saying?
So for the topper, because obviously the closer the time frame is, it's closer to, the projection is a little more accurate than 10 years down the line. So in the topper, once the budget is adopted, the topper includes the numbers that were projected in our budget document, the SIP, and those are not adjusted for the fiscal year, for that one single fiscal year.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think your question is very relevant in the fact of, is the 10 years the right play? And I would say pre-pandemic, it was a pretty good indicator of things to come. I would say in our current iteration, maybe not. And I think to Katie's point, sort of the look back of 1 year has been very vital to us, because I think what you're seeing from the Federal Transit Administration piece is even on projects that we're applying for now, even 3 years of data can be very skewed when we're talking about trying to get funding for a project where pre-pandemic we had a large ridership in a certain corridor and it dropped off significantly in 2020, but you're seeing that rebound now. So the FTA is sort of reimagining and recalculating their own formulas themselves. So I think at large, that's a very relevant question about does the 10-year look back do us a potential disservice at times? Possibly, but I think from our planning perspective, when they go back and look at the data every year to try to reevaluate, it does help us at budget time.
Okay, thank you. And then when you were talking about the sales tax revenues, so that's within the whole county, correct?
Correct.
So as Amazon fulfillment centers open, it affects certain communities and their sales tax that they get depending on where they're located. But because this is a county number, those situations don't affect what we anticipate getting, correct?
That is
'Cause
correct.
It's a bigger picture number.
Correct. So the sales taxes is collected at county level and then it's distributed between NCTD and MTS based on population estimates. So the last, most recent estimate is 29% for NCTD. So it doesn't matter really, quite frankly, where the purchases happen. It's a flat 29% for the entire region.
Okay, okay. And so some of the sales tax that different cities look at, you know, they're not only sometimes flat, but they're decreasing sometimes because people are buying less in certain economic times. So do you forecast that they're going to continue to be flat, or is there any forecast looking forward where they might be decreasing at this county level?
So SANDAG provides those estimates for sales taxes because a lot of Transnet projects are very dependent on Transnet dollars, which is sales tax driven. So overall, we are looking at less than 2% growth in the next 3 years. Averaging, I think it's about 2-point-something%, which is not quite in line with inflation. And a lot of people ask, well, how come sales taxes are not growing the same rate? Because there's a lot of goods and services that are not taxable. So you have healthcare costs, you have food, you have housing. So when there's a high increase in those basic needs, there's less disposable dollars to buy discretionary spending, which tends to have sales taxes. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. We're seeing an increase in cost, but we're not seeing the same level of growth in our sales tax revenues.
Okay.
So yeah, so we are forecasting less than 2% in the next 2-3 years.
Okay. And then on page 9, where you were talking about, you know, as we're bringing in the different services back into our control and adding different personnel and that sort of thing. Are you analyzing what we projected these numbers to be versus what they actually came in at? So we're making sure, I mean, once we're in the mode, it's not going to change, but I think it'd be good for the board to know in the future if we're hitting our forecast and if it's becoming a negative cost to us versus what we had projected to be a break even. Are we doing that?
So for every fiscal year, we do track the actual expenditures to the budget. I think what you're asking is more a long-term, where not our projection from prior years aligned with our projection for this year. What I can say is our projection for this year, our costs are going higher. So what we projected last year, actually, and all that is driven kind of what we're seeing right now, CPI. Everyone, if you see a lot of plans from other agencies from a few years ago, everyone projected growth of costs to be between 2 and 3%, and that's not really what has happened. So any projections that we had last year, this year is significantly higher. That's kind of why we see now that kind of capital deficit, meaning that more and more of our dollars are being used just to run service, run operations, just state local repair needs.
Okay, and that kind of tees me up for my next question or comment. So at some point, reading between the lines and what you've said, our revenues are going to cross our expenses. And so what are we doing now to anticipate that and be ready for it?
Yeah, I think we're really taking a deep dive into some of the contracts that we have internally, some of the vendors that we use as we start to insource. I think to answer your previous question, when we talk about things like the rail transition or the potential bus transition, are we able to do those things at a minimum impact to the organization? And I think those are definitely things that we are having conversations about. Outside of that, we are having conversations about additional funding sources. I think things that are impacting us in real time right now are the freeze of SB 125, how, I think to your previous question also, how the sales tax structure in San Diego County is set up, I think is one of the things that sort of impact that is it is population based. And I think what we're seeing is, to your point, we're seeing an increase in potential job generation, but not necessarily a potential increase in population. And so we probably, as an organization, as we grow, need to go back and have pretty specific conversations, not only with Sandag, but with the what our agreements are in real time, and do we as an agency or as a board need to move into a different phase of funding as we continue to see growth in North County. And I think those are things that need to be done over the next year and a half to really put us in line for a 2028, 2029 budget, especially if you want to see service expansion. Because I think to Yoon's point, the budget that we have now assumes that there is no service increase. And that's a problem for us, because I think we have certainly identified areas where we think there is opportunities for bus and rail service increases. And so we have to find a way to generate additional funding, not only locally, but potentially through the state. I think a big red flag for us was the freeze of the 125 money that was supposed to be allocated over the next 2 years. And I think the way we talked about it was, yeah, that's not a long-term solution. It's a 2025, 2026 infusion to the budget. We need to find ways to not do these 2-year sort of funding pickups to make sure that the budget is handled through this, through state funding or other funding identifiers. We need a solid funding source that will sustain the agency for the next 10 to 15 years at least, if not longer.
And some of the initiatives that we work on that, we're mandated to do, they're very costly to us.
Yeah.
And we don't get any money for them.
Yeah, in fact, one of the conversations we're having right now is about the Sprinter, really moving our Sprinter timeline up. I think initially we were shooting for right around the 2035 time. We've really got the staff looking into how to acquire vehicles now, and how to find funding to put PTC along that line immediately, so that we're not kicking the can down the road, that something that may cost us $120 million now will cost us $250 million in 2035. And, those are tough conversations when we show the totality of where we may be in 2029 on the capital side. But I think we have the right team to be able to aggressively talk to the state and our federal partners about what we need from an infrastructure perspective, so that we can really focus our energy on either local or state funding for operating expense.
Because that line, that cross is going to happen sooner than we think. And so it's best to be planning for it now, would be my comment. Thank
Certainly
you.
agree.
Board Member Robinson, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions, but I do appreciate the acknowledgement that 50 million doesn't get you much these days.
Amazing, isn't it? Director Garcia?
Yes, just a couple of questions. As I was reviewing the presentation, you mentioned that hydrogen is much more, or it's more expensive than natural gas, correct?
That is correct.
Wonderful. Thank you for that information. Now, what's the percentage of our vehicles that we use that are hydrogen versus natural gas?
So we are right now in the process of building a brand new hydrogen station. So we don't have any hydrogen buses in service. We received the first 4 or 5 hydrogen buses, 12 hydrogen buses. So within our budget, those buses are scheduled to go into service in October.
In October, okay. And so once those 12 buses come into service, what's the percentage of, compared to both natural gas that we currently have and the rest, and the entire ridership of buses that we use?
So I'm going to recap.
Yes,
Hydrogen buses has gone over 100% in pricing in the last couple of years, but Chris can provide more details on.
Are you looking for fleet type?
Are you looking for fleet
Yeah.
type?
Yes,
Yeah.
we have about 10 battery electric buses right now that are near the property. We'll probably have a few more of those. We do have hydrogen buses on the facility right now. Plan is over the next 2 years, I think we're going to be up to 38.
So 41,
41.
41 zero emissions total. 6 of those or 8 of those will be battery electric, and then the remainder will be hydrogen. So right now on property, we have 12 hydrogen vehicles, and then we'll get an additional 23 by early next year.
And that current low emission fleet will replace the remainder of our diesels, and then everything else in the fleet will be compressed natural gas.
Correct.
So once we receive the other amount of hydrogen, the idea is that we'll stick with natural gas?
So by this time next year, we'll have 41 zero emission of our 152 fleet, Breeze bus fleet.
All right. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is that why would we purchase and continue using hydrogen more and more and more if it's more expensive than natural gas? So.
There's
Yeah.
a state requirement to transition the entire bus fleet to zero emission.
And hydrogen is the only one that provides zero emissions?
So the hydrogen vehicles are there's battery electric solution for zero emission, and then there's the hydrogen fuel cell electric bus solution as well. Unfortunately, the technology for the battery electric version right now is not sufficient to meet our operational needs, meaning the full charge on those goes under 200 miles, and most of our routes are plus 300 miles a day. The hydrogen fuel cells more accurately meet what we need from a service level from our buses on a daily basis. Their range is in the 300 range as well, consistent with what our CNG buses do. And so our operational plan for the deployment of the zero emission has really been to have a mix of both technologies. So what we're doing with our battery electric is we're deploying those on the shorter routes where we have circulators or loops, and we're using the battery electric in those instances, a lot of out of our Escondido our yard, and then the fuel cell electric buses, which have a longer range, will be based out of our West Bus facility, where more of our longer range routes run, like the 101, which goes a significant distance.
Okay. And then you mentioned when it comes to revenue, auxiliary revenues, can you give me a few examples of what those are?
So NCTD owns and maintains the Lausanne corridor all the way from the Orange County line to San Diego. So we receive reimbursement from Pacific Surfliner, from Amtrak, and from BNSF for the use of our right-of-way.
Okay.
That's the majority of that revenue.
That's what that means. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Director Martinez, do you have any questions?
I wanted to thank particularly Director Jenkins. You had like A+ questions, so A for today. So I just wanted to understand about the federal and state grants. It's a significant amount of money. And I've heard you say that, and the noted here that assumptions of SB 125. We're waiting on the governor's new budget. Is that what's going to tell us how much money NCTD will get?
We know what the number is broken out by the 2 years. The piece that sort of impacts us in the first year of that budget is about 15 million of it goes to operating, and about another 40 million or so goes to capital. And then the second year has a very specific number to it that's broken down on both. I think the potential issue for us from probably not necessarily from an operational standpoint this year, it's more from a capital improvement standpoint. We have a fair amount of projects that are in the pipeline that we're counting on that capital money to help push us over the edge a little bit. And I think the potential issue that raises for us is every year, it's so much different now than it was 10 years ago, that every year we don't manage a capital project, it adds 10% to it, 15% to it. And so I think our plan has always been to be very aggressive about the fact that we have infrastructure money through the BIL. We have the ability to get capital money through what was SB 125. We assume we'll still get that money. That's just been frozen for now. But longer term, we need to find a way to be extensively aggressive, not only at the federal government level, but at the state level on grants. And I think it goes back to Director Garcia's comments about how do we sort of manage infrastructure projects, right? So when we started to have conversations I'll just say the West Coast on, Oregon, Washington, and California on really a desire to move to zero emission. We identified right out the gate when we went to DC. I mean, we worked very closely with the administration and said, it's not as simple as just buying a zero emission bus. We have to work with the Department of Energy. We have to work with the Department of Defense because there are things like grid resiliency that exist when you buy, like in our case, we had to add electric power to our East Division to be able to handle 8 battery electrics. If we expand that to 25 or 50, I mean, how much power are we really drawing off the grid? Hydrogen, I think in the beginning was a very good idea. I think somewhere along the line, the joint powers between Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and Transportation dropped off a little bit. And so what we thought hydrogen would be very aggressive and probably, hopefully in the neighborhood of what CNG cost us, escalated from $1 a kilogram to $5 a kilogram to, in our current iteration, which is for us to have it trucked in, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $50+, maybe even up to 70 a kilogram to have it trucked in. Now, when we build our hydrogen station, we'll be able to drive that cost down to $6 or $7 a kilogram because we'll have it on site. But I think the biggest piece for us is we want to be a part of sort of that leading edge of the next technology, but it requires us to have conversations outside of our historic pathways, which is the Department of Energy of how we manage grid resiliency or how we manage natural resources or natural gas or farming, electrolyzers for hydrogen. It forces us to talk to the Department of Defense because we can't take down the electric grid by adding that type of capacity to it. So it's a huge conversation for us. It sort of exists far beyond just buying a bus as a 1-for-1. And so, yeah, that's kind of the big concern that exists for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Luna?
Well, and we think our respective jurisdictions' budgets are volatile. I just have one quick question on the 5-year plan on slide 12, and it's more for my edification. You have minimal capital board goal D, and you're actually balancing all through, and then that's where the deficit comes in, and it says, note, board goal is 15 million annually, but yet you booked it just in 2029.
And then one thing that I want to point out is if you see a CAPA program, we do a call of projects every year. It's a district-wide call of projects where we identify all the capital needs for the district. It is a collaborative approach within the finance team as well as the project managers. And what they do is that they identify and provide estimate of what are the upcoming projects in the next 5 years. As I say, the closer that time period is, you have more visibility of what those projects are. When you move forward in the future, it requires you don't have live information or live cost information. So what you see in the capital program, and if you were to go back to our capital budgets from prior years, our capital expenditures exceed $30-40 million a year. You can see here that we are at $46 million in FY25, 62 in FY26, and we dropped that to 16. 16 does not mean that those are capital needs. That means that those are the projects that we know today, we have identified today are potential capital needs. But when we come back next year, you're going to see that $16 million be much higher than 16. So $50 million is a board goal as a minimum, but $50 million doesn't get you a lot today from a capital standpoint. So I want to point out, this is just from the minimum goal, but it's not the true reflection of what our needs are going to be in the next 5 years.
Okay, I was just wondering why all of a sudden, so that's sort of the long carryover and you're just booking it in there.
Yeah.
It's my unfamiliarity. And thank you, all my colleagues up here. You asked some very fabulous questions. Thank you.
Okay, you're stealing my thunder now. I was just going to thank everyone for all those fabulous questions and the great answers that were provided by Yoon and other staff in the room that stepped up to provide those answers. So thanks, everyone. Certainly, I apologize.
Just during this conversation. So pertaining to the zero emissions fleet, what is the current cost difference between battery electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles? And I think my second question, and maybe the one that I'm really interested in, is based off of projections, is purchasing battery electric vehicles going to be more cost efficient than than purchasing the hydrogen vehicles, even with the construction of the hydrogen station over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is they are not a one for one. So it is not. So when we talk about buying a battery electric bus and we really have to factor in the range of that vehicle, the hydrogen and the battery electrics are far more expensive than a standard diesel bus or even a CNG bus for that matter. Hydrogen and battery, depending on the availability of either the hydrogen fuel cells or the battery packs themselves, sort of depend on which one takes the jump on the higher cost. But they're definitely not a one for one because the range on a hydrogen fuel cell can handle an entire route, 250, 300 miles a day. A battery electric, depending on terrain, depending on the weather. If it's extremely hot outside, we're somewhere between 120 and 150 miles, maybe 170 on a good day, but that's not likely. And so when we talk about our long-term plan of fleet replacement, the electrics are not a one for one. We have to essentially buy about 1.5 electric buses for every one diesel bus we take out of service just to be able to keep up with the amount of miles that are required within the system. And it has a pretty significant infrastructure cost with it if we want to charge them on the street versus charging them just at our facility. So the cost is somewhat comparable, but the utilization of that equipment is not.
Thank you. That's it.
Chris, you want to add to that?
No, you got it.
Thank you for adding that question, Director Coleman. Okay, so it looks like we're done with Q&A. Thank you, Yoon,
Thank you.
again. Next on the agenda are 2 other business items. Item 13 is a consideration by the board to authorize our CEO to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreements, not and, but 2, for the redevelopment of 2 Sprinter stations in Oceanside. Lillian Duarte, our Director of Planning and Development, and Tracy Foster will present this item. Before passing the ball to Lillian and Tracy, do any board members have the need to recuse themselves?
I need to recuse myself for 13.
Thank you. So I think you will go to the crying room. We'll try to remember to come and get you when we're done. Okay, with Director Robinson done, you're gone. Lillian, Tracy, we're listening.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, board members. Just by way of background, in early 2021, we had reviewed with the board a Sprinter parking lot assessment that was performed by our on-call real estate consultant, CBRE. This assessment reviewed 10 of our Sprinter stations, identifying the potential for redevelopment of these sites, looking at the marketability and the various constraints of the sites. Also included in this assessment was a prioritization analysis. And within this analysis, it identified that our Oceanside stations having the greatest development opportunity potential. And so with that information, we prioritized the Oceanside sites as being the first to go to market. Since this study was performed back in 2021, obviously a lot has changed in the marketplace. I'm sure you've experienced in your communities as well. Things such as changes in the interest rates that have some impacts on the dynamics of redevelopment. But despite these challenges and considering our entire redevelopment portfolio and the visions and goals that NCTD has for the redevelopment, we're pleased to bring forward these opportunities today. Thanks. Okay, just a quick reminder of our guide on our redevelopments is board policy number 33 regarding joint use and development of real property. This board policy has 3 primary goals related to transit-oriented development, first being transit prioritization. So first and foremost, we are a transit agency and we need to always preserve our transit use and ensure we are increasing our riderships with redevelopment. Also, our fiscal responsibility, we look to always maximize revenue opportunities and minimize risk for the district. And lastly, community integration, engagement, and land use policies and design. We want to ensure that any development that goes onto our sites are compatible with the surrounding communities, that we're always engaging our communities in a robust outreach process, and that the developers are following the various land use policies by the local jurisdictions. Additionally, when residential and jurisdiction requirements are applicable, we advocate for affordable housing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lillian.
Thank you, Tracy. On November 21, 2022, NCTD issued task order number 10 to CBRE, our on-call real estate consultant, for the advancement of 7 Sprinter stations in the cities of Oceanside, Vista, and San Marcos. This task order included 4 sites in the city of Oceanside depicted here on the screen for you at Coast Highway, Crouch Street, Rancho del Oro, and Melrose Drive. It also included 2 sites in the city of Vista and 1 site in the city of San Marcos as optional tasks. The Sprinter sites, which are 1 to 2 acres each, provide a special opportunity for regional, local, and affordable developers to participate in NCTD's transit-oriented development reimagination. A request for proposal, or RFP, was issued on May 9th, 2023, with the option to submit for 1 site or multiple sites as a portfolio. Proposals were initially due on August 28th, 2023, but at the request of the development community, the proposal period was extended and proposals were received on October 26th, 2023. A source selection committee, or SSC, was convened to evaluate the proposals. The source selection was comprised of 5 voting members, 3 from the North County Transit District and 2 from the city of Oceanside. We were supported by 3 technical advisors from CBRE in a non-voting capacity. Here on the screen, we do see the scoring criteria. The SSC was specifically directed to review, evaluate, and interview the developers and rank them according to this scoring criteria that was published in the request for proposal. I know this text looks very tiny, so we've included it as an attachment A to the staff report for greater reference and review if you would like. The RFP was made available to potential developers through digital and direct contact over the course of 6 months. CBRE advised NCTD that feedback from the development community indicated that changing economic conditions and market uncertainty had significantly impacted developments across the nation. This included developers' willingness to take on new projects. And we saw that here. 2 of the sites the development community declined to propose due to the size and the location within the coastal zone for the Coast Highway Sprinter Station. And at Crouch Street, they cited floodplain constraints and the potential risks of development at that site. We did, however, receive 2 proposals at the close of the RFP period on October 26, 2023, and I will describe them for you now. The first proposal that we received was for the Melrose Sprinter Station, and it was submitted by the general partnership between USA Properties Fund and Waterford Property Company. USA Properties Fund is the 15th largest affordable developer in the country and the largest developer in the state of California. Waterford Property Company is a regional developer that develops extensively throughout Southern California and is expanding into Arizona. They have $2.8 billion in assets they have developed and acquired since their inception. The second proposal is for the Rancho del Oro Sprinter Station, which was submitted by SVDP Management, Inc., doing business as, commonly known as, Father Joe's Villages. They are a nonprofit organization committed to delivering affordable housing. They have over 70 years of experience and $127 million worth in real estate assets they oversee and manage. Both proposals are 100% affordable developments Diving a little bit deeper into our Melrose Drive proposal, there are 420 units, a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that are proposed on this site. They will be supported by $500,000 worth of transit-specific assets, a neighborhood park, pedestrian walkway, and 64 dedicated parking spaces. 90% of the units on this site will be provided for low-income category residents, and 10% of those sites will be for very low-income category residents. This proposal unit count would provide 20% of the City of Oceanside's regional housing needs assessment requirements at the combined low and very low income categories. The units here would be offered at a square footage of 550 to 1,100 square feet. The annual rent, $100,000, annually escalated each year by 3%. At Rancho del Oro, this is proposed as a mixed-use development with 8,000 square feet of commercial retail space and 98 affordable units. 50% of those will be offered at the low-income category, and the other 50% will be offered at the very low-income category. From a transit perspective, we will receive almost $2 million in value of improvements comprised of dedicated parking, improvements to bus bays, new bus operator restrooms, and enhanced waiting areas. This is a thoughtful design that considers how residents and transit riders will connect from our modes to the surrounding community, including destinations like the new Aquatic Center, the Front Wave Arena, and the new Senior Center. The annual rent proposed is $27,000, which would be escalated at 2.5% each year. For the board today, there are a few points to consider, which are specific to 100% affordable development projects. Complicated financing strategies to leverage government programs are intended to be used at both of these sites. While these programs are intended to accelerate affordable housing throughout the country, they do require more paperwork, more resources, and potential approvals by government entities. As I mentioned, financing like this can result in longer timeframes and greater resources. There are, however, unique opportunities from projects like this. Because of the type of funding that is required, they often contain specific conditions that are necessary, that are not tied to market rate developments or inclusionary developments. Affordable developments often are required to provide site-specific services for the residents on site, and things like transit passes and affirmative obligations to provide transit amenities that support a transit-first lifestyle, which supports increased ridership and the transit experience. If approved today, we anticipate a 6-year timeframe from ENA to completion. The milestones would include completing our due diligence, site analysis and evaluation, entitlements, and securing adequate funding, as well as construction period. For the board today, the next milestone would occur in FY 2025, when we anticipate coming back to the board with fully negotiated agreements, which would include our development agreement and our ground lease. Staff's recommendation today is to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement with USA Properties Fund, Inc. and Waterford Property Company as a general partnership for the redevelopment of the Melrose Sprinter Station, and SVDP Management, Inc., doing business as Father Joe's Villages for the redevelopment of the Rancho del Oro Sprinter Station. This concludes our presentation. We are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very informative and very thorough. Suhail, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
At this time, registration to speak on this item will end. Okay, board, looking for questions. Board Member Hensy.
Thank you, Lillian and Tracy, for the great presentation. This is such an exciting opportunity that we have I couldn't be happier that we found a partner willing to make these projects 100% affordable. It's sort of like a unicorn to find somebody that's willing to do that. So thanks for the hard work and the criteria that we're working with on our board policy to be able to allow that flexibility. I just had a few questions related to, so in the presentation, Lillian, you described rent as $100,000 a year and then $27,000 a year. Is that the lease revenue that NCTD would be receiving, or is that the rent of the occupants?
That would be the rent we would receive annually.
Okay, and so we've calculated a different value for the land based on the fact that we want to incentivize 100% affordable housing.
So we have not recalculated the rent or the land value from the Sprinter study that was completed in 2021. But we are taking that into consideration, as well as the improvements that we intend to receive as part of the construction of these sites.
Right, yeah, that's so important that we're getting the value of the construction of the new stations. I think we should approve this. I'm happy to make the motion to do so. I think there should be the stipulation that should the level of affordability change, and for some reason there needs to be market rate units included in the formula that developer's putting together, that the board is notified and that we have the chance to reconsider or look for additional partners to make sure that we're keeping it at the 100% affordable value. Something that we've discussed before, and this is probably too granular of a detail to include at this time for the consideration, but I would like to say it, and it's something that I think Director Contreras and I share the value for, that our employees could be considered to be able to rent here, because I think that's one of the challenges that we face, is finding employees who can afford to live in the region. And I know that some of our salaries fall within, at least to the 80% level of affordability. So I just ask that we can keep that in mind as we develop a more detailed proposal. But that's it. Great work. And this is really a heartening blessing for us. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Director Contreras, I see your pencil raised.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting to see 100% affordable. And I 100% echo Board Member Hinsey's comments. This is something that that both of us have been bringing up for some time, right? When we look at our bus operators, service mechanics, in order to be able to increase frequencies, we need to be able to have a strong backbone, right? And if we're able to have some kind of benefit package, compensation package that also includes affordable housing, I really want to see the details of how we can move forward in that direction. I haven't really received any details about how to move forward in that direction, but it's something that I've been commenting for some time now. I did have some questions. I'm glad I get to vote on the Melrose Drive station. It's in Oceanside, but it's about a mile walk to my house. So I utilize the Sprinter station there a lot, and the Vista Village Sprinter station. But I had a question regarding the 64 transit dedicated parking spaces. Do we have a parking study that justifies the number of parking spaces? That is significantly more than the 24 that's at the Rancho del Oro station.
So a parking team was convened in 2021, I believe, to evaluate parking, and they made a collective determination with respect to the amount of parking that would be retained at each of the Sprinter stations. The number of Sprinter stations retained is a percentage of the total that are currently there today.
Okay. Yeah, I because I'm so familiar with the Melrose Drive station, I don't think I've ever I do see cars there parked, but not to that level of 64. So I'm just wondering how we got to that number, in perhaps, what you shared, that data could be provided to the board, or, I could get briefed on it. I'm just very curious, because it seems like a lot of parking spaces for the amount of folks that I usually see park there. The other thing that I wanted to comment is that I would love to see You know, in the previous item, we talked about not having any projections for service increase, but the Melrose Drive Station, as there's a lot of development happening around that, it is very disconnected from the system. You have the 318 bus that's the closest and the 303 bus that you have to kind of walk uphill a very long way from on Beaubeer Drive. We have a senior mobile park not too far from there. I've had folks, you know, ask, how can I get better connected? So I just wanted us to keep that in mind. We also have the Inland Rail Trail that is significantly disconnected. You know, I would advocate for the folks in the city of Oceanside and Vista to really look at enhancing that intersection of Beaubeer Drive, where it turns into Oceanside Boulevard and it crosses Melrose. That is a very dangerous intersection to walk. I have videoed it and put it up on social media. It is very, very dangerous. You know, I've had to really stop cars. And as we see folks that, you know, may be utilizing this station a lot more because of our TOD that we're doing here, I want to take those factors into account. And I just want to make sure that that's on the record. But I fully support, and I'm not sure, you haven't had a second yet, right? So I will go ahead and second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Contreras. Director Jenkins.
I have a few questions. So you mentioned, Tracy, we had 10 locations that we were considering. So we did the Carlsbad, and the second one was Ensign.
The Escondido Transit Center.
Okay.
We had two, Oceanside Transit Center. We have, these are the ones that are in development right
Yes.
now. Oceanside Transit Center, Carlsbad, Poinsettia, as well as the Village, and then Escondido Transit Center.
So we have 4 that we've solidified.
Yeah.
Okay, so this would bring us to 6 of our 10. Okay.
Well, the 10 was just the Sprinter site that we had analyzed. So this is just 2 of the 10 that we had analyzed. Because it was
Okay.
just the Sprinter.
Okay, okay. And then the parking spaces, I understand the 64 and the 24 relate for our needs. There are other parking spaces for each of these developments?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So they will be required to provide and furnish the required amount of parking spaces accordance with the City of Oceanside
Right.
code.
Okay. And then I think you stated there was up to 215 points available per site. Did each of them max out at 215 points, or what was their points compared to what was possible?
I apologize. I will need to get the specific points back to you. But yes, it was out of 215 total.
Okay. Did they come like close, you know, or? They
Yes,
don't know.
so for each collective factor, they provided, you know, if we're thinking A, B,
Right.
C, they received at least a B+.
Okay, so not an A necessarily.
In some cases, there were
Okay.
A's, but I think it was a variety of factors that we were considering. As I mentioned, there was some consideration about financing and
Right.
those aspects of the project.
Okay, and then, so I think there were a few points made. It's very clear, affordable is very difficult to do right now. The fact that only one proposal on each, and then the other 2, there were none, that tells us something. Land is a significant cost for a development. And so I understand the big picture of wanting to do this. I think originally, when we talked about this years ago, it was all about how much revenue could we bring into North County, and we've kind of gone beyond that. So, so I guess I'm just going to challenge staff a little bit. Is 100,000 and 27,000 enough money to want to do these projects for our revenue?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the way that we sort of look at it is, from a development standpoint, is 27,000 a year, a lot of money for us to manage the land lease. I would say just on its face at 27,000, probably not. But when you factor in what we will gain from affordable housing, and I think the comment that was made about if that ever should change, we bring it back to we should bring it back to the board, but as an agency, we have to reassess that. I think some of the amenities that we're getting, especially at Rancho del Oro, out of the development project itself in conjunction with some of the peripheral items like the new arena, some of the development that's happening there. I think we're getting some things that are beyond the 27,000 that would probably significantly impact the agency from a capital cost perspective. Yes, I think the revenue generation is an important piece of it. And I think you see that incorporated in some of our other projects where there's not affordable housing. I think in this case, our desire to have 100% affordable housing we knew would come at sort of a cost to the agency. And we weighed back and forth whether or not should we keep the land as a land lease and be able to sort of control the condition that exists on that property. Or should we sell the land? And I think the agency felt like this was the best course of action for us because of the proximity to our service.
And I like the idea that we would reevaluate if this becomes, anytime we can increase and get more revenue out of those, the better. One of the things that I think I read in here was the commercial side of it, or the ground floor, if you will. In many times affordable projects, when you have a large square footage of other than housing use, it doesn't activate how it was originally planned to be activated. So will there be any sort of discussion in the negotiation that maybe if it's not used as it was intended, that it could be used for more homes or another need? Because some of the mixed use is not happening as was expected.
Yeah, I think that would be part of our negotiating process with as the development sort of takes shape with both of those developers, that because we are the land leaser, we want to know what business is going there, what the function is, how soon they're going to go in, what's the long-term plan for that. And so I think those are conversations we would want to have in that negotiation process with the developer so that we retain at least some type of autonomy to be able to go back and say, that was not the intention of the property. And we need to either take this back to our board or reevaluate the situation because we are the owner of the land.
Yeah, as Lillian had mentioned, we will be bringing back a ground lease to you. We're just entering into negotiations. This that we presented today is just the proposal. So we have opportunities for negotiations as the development takes shape.
Okay, and then since we're policymakers up here and the original policy was all about creating revenue, do we need to go back and reevaluate that process, that policy, because we're kind of going beyond what we originally thought was going to happen? So does that need to be, do we need to reevaluate that at some point?
That is excellent question for excellent timing. We intend to bring the policy back to the board. I think the way that we look at this is we are maximizing our revenue in the sense that we're getting improvements to the property that are specific to transit. But I think we do want to have a conversation about how we maybe in our current iteration sort of evaluate projects and what do we mean when we say maximizing revenue? Like, is maximizing revenue strictly the land lease? Is it strictly the money that we would generate from a sale of a property? No, I think it's a little bigger than that. I think there's a community value that you can place on affordable housing or some type of mixed development. And so I think we want to sort of have a conversation with the board about maybe changing the policy to be more reflective of the current time than historically where we were trying to maximize the value of the land strictly from a revenue perspective.
And I think another thing, as you look forward, when you come back to whether it's 100,000 or 27,000 for each of the sites, is maybe you also should put a value on the other components that we're gaining, the other infrastructure components. Because
Yeah,
right now it's dirt. We have nothing.
right. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. But I do think we need to reevaluate the policy as a board. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'm going to keep working this way and I'll come back to you, Director Contreras. Also, alternate Coleman, I want to call you Madison, sorry. Should you have any questions, please raise your hand. Director Garcia.
Yes, as you're working on the negotiations, but currently are you, is there going to be a variety of housing units or because you gave us square footage is very small, so it's only going to be like studios, one bedroom apartments. What is it that's the concept, the idea that you're looking for?
Yes, so at the Melrose site, it will be 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. At the Rancho del Oro site, it will be studios, 1 and 2 bedroom units.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And in regards to in regard to Father Joe's working with them, is the concept that they're going to continue to manage day-to-day operations of these facilities, both them and the other organization?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and if that's the case, are they in the negotiations or as you're discussing this, are there planning to be other type of services? Would many in other times we talk about wraparound services is for very affordable housing. Is that the concept, the idea that's being worked?
Yes, so each of the sites will have a community space where the residents will be able to go and receive supportive services, career services, education, transit services. So that is the intent for both sites.
And that would be all on the operators, not on us?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And regarding the parking spaces, what I would figure that you have already looked at what is the policy for the city of Oceanside. So are we looking at mainly, what is it per unit? One space per bedroom, 1.5, 1.25, with the difference that it's close to transportation, public transportation. Where are we? Because in our experience, what we have found is regardless of what the state law is and policy locally, we're finding that it's not usually one car, it's usually 2 vehicles. And then we're going to start spilling into the parking that has been set aside for the riders. And then if it's in violation because they're leaving it overnight. And so
the City of Oceanside recently adopted the Smart and Sustainable Corridors Plan that provides certain opportunities for developers to reduce the amount of parking. But we've learned as part of the development of other sites that sometimes what the code allows for is not the smart investment. So developers will often provide more than what the code requires because as much as we would like them to be entirely reliant on public transportation, we have not quite made the full transition in North County at this time. So developers are electing to provide 1.5 spaces if the code says 1 space. Oftentimes in transit-oriented development, the parking requirements are waived with certain benefits, and particularly given that this is an affordable development, it is likely to get some additional benefits with the city.
So I would encourage staff to encourage the developers that we do make sure that we do include some realistic amount of parking because as you have mentioned here in North County, definitely it is difficult. And I think that would save us a headache later for those that need to park for daily use.
And the current proposals are intending to bring parking for those specific uses. I believe at Rancho del Oro, the current number assignment is 91 spaces, but I will need to double check the current plan for the Melrose site.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I also just want to add that, through our negotiations, you mentioned about overflow into our parking. There's always the opportunity for managed parking so that when the transit district isn't utilizing the parking for its patrons, that there could be additional revenue opportunities as well to share in that and do that managed parking with a developer.
I like that. Thank you.
Okay, Director Martinez?
Just have one quick question, but first I wanted to thank you so much and congratulate you on your progress so far. I think these are both really great developments, so I hope these will both be successful. I just really have a question that I'm hoping you can bring back the answer. So in Del Mar, we are doing an 100% affordable housing project as well. And there was some hope that some of the full-time jobs on the fairgrounds employees could have access to it because it will be in that area. And if I'm right, and I could be wrong, that's why I need your help to come back, that you can't, I guess, put in the agreement that certain people need to be housed because there's criteria and a lottery system and so on. So I would just like to learn if that is something that could be put in the contract, that NCTD employees would have preference, or if that's not allowed. And you probably don't know, but I'd just like to know, and I think the board should know.
Yeah, we don't have that information for you right now, but I will tell you that Lillian had been working closely with Sandag and MTS on a study to be performed about affordable housing for transit workers. There was a freeze on the funding source on that, so we're not advancing it at this moment in time, but we're hoping that funding will become available and that we can get that going, and it'll give us better understanding of how that process can all work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Director Luna?
Mine just sort of a follow-up on that, and my colleague from Del Mar and San Marcos. As far as policy preferences, if you could maybe potentially expand it not only to fairground employees, but NCTD employees, as well as potentially veterans. I know there is certain criteria, but there's also funding opportunities that come with that. So I think that maybe if we can expand that. And then also I am assuming, and I know what assume means, so that's why I'm going to ask them. The developer will be assuming all of the permit cost and whatnot, correct? It's not on us at all.
Yes.
Okay, and Tracy and Lillian, fabulous. This is so complicated. We're having a not so pleasant experience in Carlsbad on one of our projects, and hopefully this will go much more smoothly. Thank you.
All right. Director Alternate Coleman, do you have any questions? No? Okay, back to Director Contreras.
Thank you. This has been a really good discussion. And I just do want to remind folks that parking has a significant cost. I think last time I saw it was about $65,000 per space, and that was before all this crazy CPI. And we don't currently have a housing crisis for cars. We have it for people. So I'm all for managed parking as well. I think half of those at Melrose could probably be managed parking. I don't know if there's a way to generate revenue with EV charging as well. But you said something about transit services. Are we going to have, are these going to be areas where folks can get verification for YOP senior and disabled? Are we thinking about that?
I don't know that we have any specifics on that at this time.
Not at this time.
Okay,
That's
I
quite
just
early.
would recommend that maybe if we are, building out TOD, that we do have verification services. Maybe it's not every single day, but maybe that's a great place to have in the community room, a pop-up, on a quarterly basis or whatever the case might be, so that we can get folks the verification for the discounts that they deserve. The other, I think that was all, except for I do recall at one point when we were talking about employees and rent affordable housing, that there was some kind of negotiation that could go in. So again, I'll just ask I'll get the information offline, but I really want to dig into it because I feel like we haven't made any progress on the questions that have been asked previously. Oh, and I do remember the last thing. Can you tell me the AMI again for both locations?
Yes, so the annual median income at low is $33,000 to $53,000. At very low, it's $33,259 or less. And those are considered 50 to 80% of AMI for low and less than 50% for very low.
Okay. What I would say is that that's great. That's a great starting point. But to add to some of the comments about generating more revenue, I think the most critical component for affordable housing is to have it deed restricted. And we do have the ability to go up to 120 AMI, which I would rather, instead of looking at market rate that has no deed restriction, if we need to have a different financial package, then if we could look at maximizing the AMI prior to going straight into market rate, I think that would be really critical because having that deed restriction provides stability for folks. And even if you're making $60 an hour, it's really expensive to live here. So you don't want to, the whole thing about affordable housing is not having to shell out more than 30%, right, of your income, which allows folks to have bigger purchasing power. And in a capitalist society, that is incredibly important for folks to have purchasing power. That's how we get more sales tax revenue, right? So I would really just advocate for the deed restriction. If we need to go up to 120%, I'm for that conversation. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm writing notes here. Okay, any other questions? Director Hensy?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I think that that question is part of the holistic policy discussion that can come back to us because to me, it shouldn't be on a case-by-case, site-by-site basis that you're coming back to the board when these proposals change a little bit. But I think we can probably implement that from the top down if it's part of our policy consideration.
Great comment. Thank you so much. Director Garcia?
One of the amenities that you mentioned was bathrooms. Thank you very much for that, because I am getting a lot of comments from the riders, especially on the sprinters, what I'm really hearing. You said from Oceanside all the way to Escondido, there's not a place to stop for a bathroom, more or less. And I think this is going to be a welcome conversation and a welcome point that I can share with my riders, my constituents that are riders regarding this. So I forgot to mention that earlier. Thank you so much.
All right there. Director Jenkins.
Two more questions. Director Garcia, I think, touched on this. So as part of the development, the developer, I'm guessing, will partner with a service provider that will be on site to assist the residents with needs and that sort of thing?
We haven't gotten to that level of detail, so it's possible that particularly with Father Joe's Villages, they have quite a large, robust in-house staff, and they are dedicated to providing affordable housing. So they may choose to use in-house staff, but it's also possible they may contract out to provide those services.
Right, because I think that's very important for the residents. And then the other follow-up I had, again, I think Director Garcia was talking about the bedrooms. One of the things I'm hearing from affordable developers is they're finding what people need is the 2 and 3 bedrooms and the larger unit. So I think it's Rancho del Oro, which has no 3-bedroom units there. This is kind of down in the weeds, but I just think I think there should be a look at, the bedroom count to see if they're going to build what is needed by the people who needs these types of homes.
Sure, we will have that discussion with
Yeah.
them. That will be all part of the negotiation as we move through this process.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. We've gotten a lot of good direction from the board so far. I've been making notes and crossing off things that I was going to ask because other people have asked them. But let me take a quick look. I do have a lot of, I always have a lot of notes.
You want to make sure.
So I definitely support many of the comments that were made today. I think that this is high level at this point, and we will have some more detail coming back to us with these leases when they come back. With regard to parking, I understand the desire to not waste space on parking, but as happened in LA, they built subways and stations, but no parking, thinking everybody would walk. There was TOD around it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so they've lost all the choice riders because they didn't have enough sufficient parking for them. So there is a place for parking. And as we grow our ridership and grow people's acceptance and desire to choose transit, we need to make it easy for them to do so. So I caution us to discount the need for parking because I think it does exist. And yes, people will probably bleed over from different parking areas and there are possibilities to control that or mitigate for that, which is good to hear. Wraparound services, I like hearing that's part of it and hope to see that really firmly laid out in the what comes back to us. Also, tying to the AMI and deed restricting, I think is very important. If, you know, if the board's looking at something and we're giving away revenue from the district because we believe in affordable housing and supporting that, we need to make sure that that remains. So whether that's, and the term of that affordable housing, is it going to be 10 years? 30 years, you know, what is that? So these are all important. I think that's all I have because I think that you all did a great job of asking questions. We have a motion by Director Hensy, second by Contreras, and I think it's time to vote.
On the motion of Board Member Hensy, seconded by Board Member Contreras, to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to enter into exclusive negotiating agreements with USA Properties Fund and Waterford Property Company for the redevelopment of Melrose Sprinter Station and SVDP management for the redevelopment of the Rancho Del Oro Sprinter Station. Motion passes. Board Member Robinson has recused himself from item 13.
Thank you, ma'am. We need to invite him back. And while we do so, I think we'll take a 5-minute break. So everybody please be back here by 1:10. General Counsel Lori Winfrey. Oops, I will start again. The final item on our agenda regards the annual performance evaluation for NCTD's General Counsel Lori Winfrey. Karen Tucholsky, Chief Operations Officer, Operations Support Services, will present this item. Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, board members. Ms. Winfrey has been employed as General Counsel with NCTD since 2013. For her employment agreement and board policy, the Executive Committee is tasked with conducting an annual performance evaluation. Accordingly, the Executive Committee met twice to conduct the evaluation and develop recommendations, which it presented to the full board in today's special meeting. Ms. Winfrey's performance was rated as exceeds expectations by the committee, and they conducted negotiations with her to complete a proposed new employment agreement. This slide details the key terms of the proposed new agreement. It contemplates a 5-year base term, starts with a base salary of $315,000, which provides also for future annual COLA escalations capped at 3% based on continued satisfactory performance by Ms. The proposed agreement also includes a one-time $30,000 stipend upon agreement execution and future annual $20,000 stipends thereafter, which would also be based on continued satisfactory performance by Ms. The Board of Directors is asked to approve a recommendation to receive the Executive Committee's performance evaluation for General Counsel and to approve the proposed employment agreement as presented to you today. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Karen. Suhel, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item has ended. Are there any board questions or comments? Board Member Hensy.
I would just like to thank Ms. Winfrey for her dedication to the organization, all the tremendous work that you do on our behalf, and I would like to move approval of the recommended action.
Thank you. Directors, let's see who's first.
I was first.
He was first.
Director Garcia.
First, I'd like to second that and also say just ditto. It's a joy to work with you and thank you so much.
Okay, Director Luna, did I see your hand up? No, that pencil was waving around just for fun. Director Contreras.
Well, I will third that since I wasn't in there fast enough to second it. But Lori, I really appreciate your dedication to North County Transit District. You have held this organization together through a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of opportunity for us in the future, and your expertise is going to be critical for that. And I do appreciate, the executive committee. We had to go back and forth. We want to make sure that we keep you here because you're such a huge asset. And I appreciate the entire board really just shining a light on our affectionately known as our law individual. So thank you.
I would like to echo the comments of my colleagues, and we have a motion by Director Hensy, second by Director Garcia. Please vote.
On the motion of Board Member Hensy, seconded by Board Member Garcia to approve the annual performance evaluation for General Counsel and approve the employment agreement for the General Counsel, motion passes.
Thank you. I believe that our General Counsel has a few words for us.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank the board, the executive committee for our robust conversations and for recognizing that I bring value to the district. And I'm very excited. We're 11 plus years into my tenure here, and I'm looking forward to the 5 years on this contract, doing great things for the board and for the district. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. Next order of business is the Chief Executive Officer's report. Sean, what do you have to share with us today?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. First of all, I'd like to thank the amazing staff here at Oceanside for allowing us to use the council chambers and for the help they gave us in getting the meeting set up. As you know, we are doing a little a couple changes down in the basement over at GAO. Hopefully we'll be back there in the next couple months, but in the meantime, just want to say thanks to Oceanside staff. Ricky Cervantes, who works in our planning department, was accepted into the American Public Transportation Association's Emerging Leaders Program. That is not something that is easy to get into. I think it speaks volumes of our planning department and the work that they do. And I was able to spend a little time with Ricky when we were in Portland a few weeks ago at the mobility conference. And I'm always intrigued by the work that the emerging leaders do. They're sort of the future leaders of the organizations that they represent throughout the nation. They do a lot of good work on projects throughout the year, and then they present those at the end to the staff. And when we get to the end of that presentation, we'll have Ricky come to the board and present what his group sort of worked on throughout the year. So be on the lookout for that in 2025. Board Forward is coming up May 31st. We'll get the agenda posted pretty soon. Want to take a minute to, Mary and Chris will be in Sacramento at the California Transit Association Conference next week. So hopefully we'll get some good information out of that. We have two new chiefs that started with us this week. Tom Tully, I think they just left with the new hire group, but Tom Tully was hired as our Chief Operations Officer of Rail, and Alex Dennis as our Chief Procurement Officer. So you'll be seeing more of them at the meetings and at our Board Forward event. We also have two promotions among the group. Suhail Rodriguez to Director of Administration. Congratulations. And Mary Dover to Chief of Staff. I do want to take a minute to thank Karen T and the amazing HR staff. We've got a lot of our open positions filled over the past couple of weeks. There's been a really concerted effort to try to shore that up while we've been sort of working on the budget piece. So thanks to the HR team. A big thanks again to our coaster and maintenance teams who will be doing some positive train control testing this evening. A few of us may be out and hanging out with them while they do that along the line. It's always fun to watch the work that they do. Starting Sunday, we will be removing the last run of the evening from our coaster service to sort of expand the work window for the Del Mar Bluffs construction that's happening down there. What we're really doing is reallocating that last run from Sunday night to midday Saturday afternoon. So we're still going to have that run in there somewhere. It's just going to fill in a little bit of a different location. We were at the City of Vista Council meeting this last Tuesday. Want to take an opportunity to thank them. It was a great opportunity to talk about grade separation and a lot of the things we have going on the rail and quiet zones, our favorite topic here at NCTD. So, wanted to say thanks to Vista City Council for that. We will be at the San Marcos Farmers Market on June 11th for the ribbon cutting of our NCTD Plus. Please feel free to join us. And lastly, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank Yoon and the finance team, as well as the entire finance department staff and the staff and all the other departments for putting together the budget this year. I think we've done a really good job of making sure that our 2 to 3 year outlook is pretty phenomenal from a management of expenses versus revenue standpoint. And that was not necessarily an easy thing. So I want to make sure they're recognized for that. And, we do have, I think we discussed a little bit today, we've got some interesting challenges in front of us over the next few years, but I think we've got the right staff to jump in and handle it. And I'm very thankful to be working with them. And Madam Chair, members of the board, that's all I have today.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any brief comments to share? Nope. Okay. Oh, Director Garcia.
Yes, just to say, not only do we have the right staff, but I believe we have the right executive leadership too. So thank you, sir.
Thank you for that comment. I have a brief comment. On Friday, May 10th, I participated in the quarterly meeting of the Lausanne Rail Corridor Regional Working Group. This productive and informative meeting was hosted by Mark Tollefson, California's Undersecretary of Transportation, and Chad Edison, California's Chief Deputy Secretary for Rail and Transit. Representatives from MPOs and COGs, transit agencies, elected officials, and other interested stakeholders representing the 350-mile-long Lausanne corridor traveled to Goleta, California to discuss the corridor's sustainability challenges and potential solutions. Key takeaway, stakeholders along the corridor must work together to pinpoint the areas of greatest need and unite together to seek the funding necessary to maintain and grow this vital rail corridor that we all share. Congratulations to Mary and Suhail. And I look forward to meeting our new chiefs. Great news. Suhail, do we have any remaining public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, registration for non-agenda public comments has ended. The next scheduled meetings are the Performance Administration and Finance, aka PAF Committee, on May 23rd, 2024 at 1 p.m. at 311 South Tremont Street in Oceanside. The much anticipated, interesting and informative Board Forward on May 31st at 10:30 a.m. at the Fletcher Cove Community Center in beautiful Solana Beach. That's located at 133 Pacific Avenue. And the regular board meeting, June 20th, 2024 at 11 a.m. here at Oceanside City Hall, 300 North Coast Highway. I would be remiss if I didn't also give a shout out to the city of Oceanside, thanking them for allowing us to use their beautiful facility while ours is being remodeled. With that, this meeting is adjourned.